In this lesson, we are going to build this super stretchy rig. So we've got a top control, a bottom control that can, but they both can move around and twist like this. The geometry will stretch. And we also have the root control, so we can move this around anywhere that we want. This is a bendy structure, and I don't want you to focus on, hey, this only works for, say, a cylinder here. This setup can be used in many circumstances. So anything that you need to bend in this fashion, it can be part of your rig. It doesn't need to be the whole entire rig. So this setup is actually pretty simple, but it is very powerful. So if you learn this simple setup, you'll be able to use it in many circumstances. All right, let's get started. All right, so I'm going to draw a schematic of what we're going to be building today. Now this stretch to setup can be used in many different circumstances, more than you would expect. So I want you to think bigger than what I'm showing you now, which is why I'm kind of showing you the schematics part of it. And it also helps understand things before we jump into the software and get lost by pushing all the buttons and whatnot. So the main construction of our rig is just going to be a 3-bone chain. Now these will initially all start out being parented together, but this top one is going to be parented to a different bone. So I'm going to name these. This middle one here, I just put a little coloring on that one because that's going to be our special bone that actually does the deformation as well as has the constraint, the stretch to constraint on it. So this one's going to be our def bone. This is the magic bone that does all the work. Down here, this is going to be our start handle. We're going to call that in. And this one here, we're going to call out. That is the out handle or the end handle. And then I'm going to give it a control for the top. So I'm just going to draw it exploded, even though it will sit in this position. So that is going to be our top control. And then also down here, we're going to have a bottom control, and that one's going to sit here. So that's going to be our bottom control. And then one master control that's going to control everything. And I'll draw this down here, even though it is going to sit in the same spot here. This is going to be our root. So how does all this parenting work? Well, it's pretty simple. As I said, these are going to start out as a connected chain. Then I'm going to parent our out bone to the top control over here. And that is the way that we're going to control all our bending. And when we do that, we need to make sure that we change the handle type of our bendy bone so that it is still using this one, because we can't use the automatic because it's no longer a parent-child relationship. And the special magic that's going to make this work is the stretch to constraint. Stretch to, and that's the magic. Now this controller can't be parented to this chain, otherwise a stretch to is not going to work because you can't stretch to a child if that's dependent on the parent. You know what I mean? You get a dependency cycle, which is why we're doing this little bit of a parenting trick. Now the other parenting that's going on is pretty straightforward. The bottom of this chain is just going to be parented to our bottom control. And then both of our controllers are going to be parented to the root. So this guy is going to be parented to that guy. And that's the way it works. Okay, and that's our setup. Let's get to building it. All right, we're going to build this. So I'm starting with my cursor in the world origin, and I am in the front view, just so that you guys know. So the first thing I'm going to do is add in an armature, a single bone, and then we're going to jump into edit mode. And I will also turn on my bone name so you can follow along. And I'll turn on my axis so you can see the direction that I'm pointing. So this first bone here, let's just call it, we're going to use this one to be our bone in. Okay, and because this one isn't going to be a deformation bone, I'm going to use all lowercase. And then I'm going to move this one down. I'm going to grab everything, and I'm just going to shift it down -1 on the world Z axis. And that's because I want the tail of the bone to be sitting at the origin point. Okay, so I'm going to extend this one up. So let's just go E, extrude this one up. Let's go 3 units tall. So I'm just going to type in 3 there. And then I'm going to change my the snapping mode to incremental, so I can just go E and hold down control and then snap at the top here. That wasn't totally necessary, but I just wanted it to be exactly the same size or length as this in bone here. Now we need to name them. This is going to be our bone underscore def, and this is the magic B bone that's going to do all the work. And this one's our bone out, so let's go bone underscore out. So now I'm going to select the top and the bottom, although it's going to select everything. And the next bit I'm going to do, I'm just going to move it slightly over and move it back. Sometimes it's easier to see what you're working at. So I'm going to snap it on the x-axis and just 1 unit over. Now, I don't need this middle bone, so I'm going to delete that with the X key and just delete that one there. Now these ones are going to be controls. So I actually need to flip this one around. So I'm going to flip with the Alt F, and now it's facing the opposite direction. because I wanted the head of the tail to be at this position here. This one's okay. Now we need to orient them the right way. So I'm jumping into the side view now, and I want to rotate this bone down so that the Z-axis is aligned with the world. I'm rotating it and then hitting 90 and then hit enter. And that has now aligned it with the world. I'm going to do the same thing, but I might need to fix up the roll. So I'm going to rotate it this way. That will be negative 90 degrees. And I want to make sure that my Z-axis is pointing up as well. Just so that when the animator controls it, if they move it on the Z-axis, it's going to move up, and that's going to be very helpful for them. So these ones are actually controls, so we can change the name here. So we're going to call this one bottom. I'm going to use a capital letter there, and this one is going to be our top, F2, top. Now we've got all our bones named, and we just need one more control, which is going to be our root control. So just for now, I'm going to duplicate this one and then snap it over here. And we want to make this one bigger so we can actually see what we're doing. So I'm grabbing the tail of the bone and then I'll just extrude it along the y-axis. And yeah, that's big enough. Okay, and this one is going to be a control, so we're going to use a capital letter. And now I'm going to move these ones back into place. So I'm just going to do that from the front view, grab and constrain on the x-axis by holding down my middle mouse and moving in that direction. I'm going to snap it so it's aligned back where it was. I can't see what's going on, so I'm going to make everything wireframe. So I'm going to jump over to the Object tab, Viewport Display, then change this to be wire so we can see through. And also, I'm done with seeing this in the octahedral mode. So I'm going to jump over to B-bone mode so we can actually see. And because I still have those selected, I'm going to make them fatter so they can be easily selected when the root's in the same place. So I'm going to go Control-Alt-S, scale these ones up just so that they're fatter. I also scaled them both together so I know that they're going to be the same B-bone size. Not that that's super important, but it just helps me. All right, let's do the parenting. So this out control, the end of our end handle, is going to be parented to this guy. We first select the child, then the parent. Who's daddy? Control P, I am, and we choose keep offset. And then this chain, the in handle, gets parented to the bottom control. Control P, keep offset. And then we want to select both of our controls here and then select our root control last. Control P, keep offset. That's all our parenting. Now we're going to set up our constraints. Well, actually, let's do our B-bone now. This is the magic part. Jump over to the bone tab. You'll see the Bendy bones here. And let's just raise the segments up. It goes up to 32. I don't reckon we need 32. Let's just go 12. It's a nice number. Let's just test this. If I rotate this now, you'll see that our bone is bending, but it's not sticking to the top. And that's because we have to adjust our handles. So we can leave the start handle at automatic because it's going to use this, this bone here. But let's change our end handle to be tangent. And then let's choose the out bone, the bone out. Now when we do that, it's going to work. And if we rotate this one, it's going to act a little bit funny. We're not actually going to be rotating this one in our actual real rig. We're going to be controlling it with this guy over here. All we need to do is add a stretchy constraint to this guy with this top control being the target. So we select that one, we select this one. Who wants a constraint? I do. Control-Shift-C, and then choose stretch to. And now when we move this around, whoops, now when we move it around, it's going to act the way that we want. So we've got our bendy bone in the middle, and this is our setup. All right, so we're not quite finished yet. I'm going to organize this onto layers and only make the bone that does the deformation bone. Right, because when you create a bone, the deformation is automatically turned on. What I'm going to do is select our bone and invert the selection with Control I to invert the selection, and then hit Shift W and disable the deform on those bones. Now when I do this, I always make sure that I open up this redo panel and change it from toggle to disable. And that way I know 100% that I have turned those off for those bones. So now if you click on any of these bones, there is no deformation happening. This is good. This is what we want. Now I'm going to organize our controls. So I'm going to put all we need to control is these two ones here. So they're going to be on layer 1. So I just hit the M key there. And I like to put our root control on a different layer. I always put it on this one just so it's easy for me to find. So I just usually put that one down there. Then we don't actually need to see all these bones. What I'm going to do is These ones are kind of helper bones. So I usually put them on the second last layer on the top. This one is our deformation bone, so always put him on the last layer on the top. All right, that's my rig done. But I will turn those layers on. Now let's do some custom shapes. All right, so let's start with the root control shape. So I want to make a compass looking shape. So I'm going to do that in object mode. And then I don't actually need to see my armature at the moment, so I'm just going to temporarily hide it. And then I'm going to add in a circle from the top view. So Shift A, add mesh, and choose circle. I'm going to leave it at the default settings. And I know the radius is going to be 1, so it's going to help me position it. And then I'm going to jump into edit mode and turn this into a compass. So how do I do that? I'm a really bad modeler, but I'm just going to work on one side first and then spin it around so it's got the whole lot going on. Grab this one, drag up to about there, that'll do. Let me subdivide this, drag this one out, somewhere about there, subdivide this one again. Now you could probably be going, what is this guy doing? And that is because I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to modeling. I'm just changing over to the vertex snapping there, and then so to align those ones, and then I'm going to grab this one up to align that one. So I just need a little bit more height on this, and let's go a little bit, actually let's go a little bit shorter. There we go. So now I've got one tip, and I'm going to delete everything I don't need and spin it around. So let's just go delete all those vertices, and let's delete these ones. Oops. Delete vertices, select all of them, Shift D, and then make sure I'm rotating around the 3D cursor, and then rotate. Actually, let me mirror this first. So I'm going to go mirror modifier. Let's go mirror on the X and the Y. That's good. Let's apply this. So I'll do that in object mode. And now I'm going to spin this around. So I have all my verts selected, Shift D, duplicate, and then rotate 90 degrees, and select everything and delete doubles by hitting M for merge, and then merge by distance. And now I have my compass shape. So I'm going to give this a name, so I'm going to call this widget root, and I'm going to also make sure that that the data name matches the object name. I haven't done that with my armature. So let's just do that now. So armature, let's call this one stretch 2 underscore rig, and I'll copy that. Paste that. So now I know all my data is in order, and I can actually turn this back on so we can see it. And I want to apply this shape to our root bone. So I do that in pose mode, jump over to bone, go down to viewport display, and then just use my icon here. I'm going to choose that widget. Boom. And now you notice that it's got that shape. It's a little bit big. Actually made this go a little bit past the end there, so let me fix that. Jump back into edit mode here, and I want to make sure that the whole radius is only about 1 meter. So I'm going to scale it back down till it hits about there. Actually, can I hold down control? No. So I'm just going to eyeball it. That's close enough. Now when I jump back into object mode, you'll see that it matches the tail of our bone. Now also to change the size of this bone, I can go to edit mode, and because this is just a control bone, I'm going to shrink it down. Oops, and snap back to my increment. I'm going to shrink it down to so it's only that size, and that's kind of a better size for our control here. So if you're doing it the long way, you'd have to repeat that process for all of the shapes that you wanted to do. Let's show you how I do it with the add-on bone widgets. So here I am, I'll just jump back a few steps, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a root control for this guy here. So I jump over to my tools, let's choose the root control and go create. Boom. You see it's created a nice collection with my widget shape already named in there. And then I choose these ones here, and I'm going to create a circle for these guys. So I can do both at the same time, go create. Boom, they're facing the wrong way, and I want it to rotate around the x-axis here. So I type in 90 degrees, and they've rotated around there, and then I scale them down to a nice size. So let's go 0.55. Actually, let's 0.55. That'll do. So that's how I do it. We're using the bone widget add-on. So fast and easy. Now let's set up some bone colors. So So we do that in the bone groups. I want two colors. So I want the root and then I want the controls. Let's just call this one root and then controls here. So the root control, I'm going to assign to this one. Let's make it the red and then go assign. And then that way we've got the nice red color there. Let's choose these two controls. Make sure that we assign it to this control group. I'm going to make this one actually yellow. And let's go assign. So they're kind of easy to see. And there we go. And the next thing is to actually attach this rig to some mesh. So let's do that. Now, normally you already have a mesh and you build your rig to the scale of the mesh, but it's a little bit different for this demonstration. So I'm just going to add in a cylinder. So let's go mesh add cylinder. And because I know that this was 3 meters high, I'm going to make the depth 3 meters, and that should match. And then I'm going to move it up so it matches. I'll just jump into wireframe so you can see what I mean. So I want the bottom to be up here. Actually, and let's shrink it down a little bit. So the radius, I'm going to shrink it down so it's kind of like a tube. That's looking good. And I can also, I'm going to raise it up to be 1.5 meters. So that should match exactly. Okay, so now we have our cylinders here. So I'm going to jump into edit mode and add some more loops here. So let's just go Control R and let's just rocket it up. And I didn't mean to move that, so I'm going to hit 0 and enter. And that's going to evenly distribute those loops. Okay, so jump back into solid mode. You see, here's my tube. Let's shade it smooth. So I'm going to hit W, shade smooth. And now let's just fix the shading on the top. So I'm going to jump into edit mode again, select the top and the bottom. And then hit I. And then scale it in just slightly. So we've got a nice sharp corner. Let's have a look at our shading there. One more loop. I'll shrink these down again, so make sure that they're on individual origins. And then let's go there. And now I'm going to bevel this edge. Control B, and then create a tiny little bevel there just to smooth it out. And roll my mouse wheel up once just to create that loop in the middle. Now when we zoom in, let's have a look at this. It's a nice kind of smooth transition. You don't get that dodgy shading. Okay, so now let's attach this to our rig. Now, how do we attach it? Because we're doing bending and stretching, we actually need to use the armature modifier rather than just straight parenting to the bone. So I'm going to select our mesh, then our armature, Control P, and then choose armature deform, but I want to choose automatic weights. Now, I know it's going to work well because there is only one bone that is set to deform. That's what I did before. Actually, before I do that, you see it's added that vertex group, bone def, and that will weight all the vertices to that stretch bone in the middle here. So now let's jump into pose mode for this guy. And if we move it around, you'll see, got this cool rig. Super stretchy. And we can even, let's give this one a subdivision surface. So where is it? Here. And we want this one to be after the armature modifier. If we do it before, we have it before, then the armature modifier has to work twice as hard because there's extra geometry. So just as a little hack and to speed things up, put your armature before it multiplies the geometry by 4. And that is the Stretchy rig. Now, I just want to show you a few more things before we go, a couple of gotchas with this stretch to constraint system, and that is about the length of our geometry and where you place the bones. So I've got 3 examples here. This one is too short, this one is just right, and this one is too long, just like the Goldilocks situation. And I want you to pay attention to how the bones behave. So this one here is only covering about 2/3 of our bone, roughly. And then if we stretch it and move it along, it's still covering about 2/3 of the bone, but it's actually getting further away from their ends here. So that's what happens if you have one that is too short. And you've already seen the one that is just right. So this is our just right situation where you can see that the geometry stretches 100% all the way from the start to the end. That is when we do it to the correct length. And then if we go over, I want you to watch what happens to the ends. It kind of keeps stretching. So this is just something to be wary of when we stretch it really big. And you can see this one's stretching past. It's actually getting further away from our target here. So these are all things to be wary of when you use the stretch to constraint, and in particular when you use it in one component of your rig. See here, I've actually used it, it's the whole entire rig essentially, but sometimes you'll use this setup in certain segments of your rig. You just need to be wary of the length. If you get it pretty close to matching 100% of the length, then you're less likely to run into any issues.